Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Love of Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Lyle Gator, and today we are talking about responding to Uncut Angling's Barotrauma video and discussing the future of fishing. Guys, it's great to be back on the show. I know it's been a little while since I put out a podcast, but I thought with the recent video that was posted by Uncut Angling, it'd be a great time to weigh in and continue the discussion that he started. I think it's a really important topic, especially being, a conservation-minded angler like myself. I do have a guest on the show today. It's someone who you've probably heard from before. It's my good friend Victor Papaiz.
Hello there.
And he is going to be adding his input and his experience with barotrauma and some cool stuff there. So thank you to my sponsors this year that have helped make this year great, make it possible. Big shout out to Freedom Tackle for their continued support of the Love of Fishing podcast and everything that I do. Friends and family, hope you had a great holidays and are ready for a great new year ahead. So let's do a little bit of diving into the Uncut Angling video. If you haven't seen it before, check it out. He recently posted a 38-minute video talking about barotrauma and his comments on some science that got published by Angling Buzz, and he was very critical of it. It's a video that we haven't seen before from Uncut. Amazing stuff, very impressive. His video work is always so good, and his message behind this one was very, very intellectually stimulating, I would say. He is looking at how barotrauma works. He explains it to the viewers, and basically he's commenting on management practices and how science unfolds, how science is used with media, specifically with this Angling Buzz piece that came out, looking at Livescope, and basically what he's saying is the science that was shown on the video, it is opening the door for bad management to come in, and basically looking at Livescope as the villain. You got to check it out. You got to see it for yourself. But basically, I wanted to continue the discussion with regards to barotrauma. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a great opportunity for Victor to step in and kind of run through what that is, what it looks like, and then we'll kind of weigh in on the Uncut Angling video.
Yeah, right on. So first of all, thanks for having me on. Again, Lyle, always happy to do this with you. What I really liked about the Uncut Angling video specifically was how Aaron really displayed and conveyed the relationship between science and how that affects management practices and what you can expect to see in regulations that come out in the future. And the big takeaway for anyone listening is that good science educates management practices and regulations with the goal of having sustainable fisheries. That's why science is done in this regard, science and ongoing monitoring. In Ontario, there's a lot of ongoing monitoring projects that have been going for nearly 100 years that's educated so many regulations and fishing seasons and so forth that have really allowed our fisheries to succeed. And I mean, we all know even nowadays it's some of the best fishing we've seen in a long time, and that's because of good science and good ongoing monitoring. But with all the science being done out there, there's good science and there's bad science. I think Aaron did a really good job of critiquing this one experiment. But the thing there is, it's not just science that educates regulations and management, but it's science, monitoring, education, and a bunch of different stakeholders. He did a good job of representing the importance of Aboriginal ways of thinking, anecdotal evidence from anglers, all of which are important stakeholders, because science can't do everything. Anglers can't do everything. Like if anglers were making the regulations, it'd probably be even less successful overall. But it's when all these people come to the table to really figure out what makes the most sense from everyone's point of view. Sometimes it makes more sense to have science take up a little bit more of that pie, sometimes a little bit less. But you can never make decisions based on one avenue of thinking alone, and I think he conveys that really well.
So there's an interesting time right now with Livescope really coming into the mainstream. I know, at least on the river this year, I saw more and more people with Livescope. It's going to change the game, if it hasn't already. It's going to change it more than I think any other generation has seen, even with traditional sonar. The ability to find fish in water that you didn't know had fish. For example, we're catching smallmouth bass in 50 to 60 feet of water regularly now on Lake Erie. And that's just a zone that no one explored before. king salmon, whether you're trolling, whether you're looking to jig them, that's getting wide open. It is a fast shifting landscape on the water, and you can thank or hate on Livescope for that. Aaron looks at Livescope as this tool that increases the interaction between an angler and the fish. And that's really why I love this tool. A lot of people are critical of Livescope. They say it's like cheating. In some ways, it feels like cheating because it makes fishing so easy. However, I would argue that you need to have the background when you're fishing to be able to use this tool so effectively. So for me, I grew up fishing normally. He talks about the mystery of fishing. That was very much part of my upbringing. The mystery of fishing, not being able to see underwater and understand what's going on. Now that's been shifted because you can see what's going on. You can see your lure coming back to the boat. He mentions all that. I think it's great. I think people are going to be more interested in fishing. They're going to be less bored. But obviously, this does put some pressure on fish populations, which is sort of what he's talking about here with barotrauma, being able to catch those fish in 30, 40 feet of water where it's putting stress on them. Victor, can you just explain what barotrauma looks like when you're fishing and why it's not a good thing?
Yeah, of course. So again, Aaron did a pretty good job of explaining it in the video, but the fish's air bladder expands as you bring it up from depth. There's less pressure on it. It expands. There's two different kinds of swim bladders that fish can have. It's physoclistic and physostomous, and I always forget which one's which, but one allows the fish to burp and expel this excess air as it expands, so your lake trout, for example. And then other fish species, like your black bass, they have the other kind of air bladder where they can't do that. So for the fish that can't expel that extra oxygen, they experience barotrauma. Occasionally you'll see it as a bulging in the eyes, especially in a lot of saltwater species when you're taking them up from crazy depths. But more frequently, you'll see them just lose their equilibrium when you're holding them out of the water, or when you hold them in the water after having them out, whether that's in a live well or on the side of the boat. And occasionally you'll also see the air bladder pushing up the gullet of the fish. So if you open up the mouth and look inside, you see something that's not always what you want to see. So, of course, the repercussions of this is that the fish can't effectively swim down. It's interesting seeing in Aaron's video how he was able to really accurately display that if you get them back in the water right away, they have a better chance of making it down, and in his case, a perfect chance. But that's not always the reality. And especially for people, let's say you're in a tournament, even a live release tournament. So if you think of Major League Fishing, they're out of the water a lot less, but you still have to weigh them. Let's say that person with the balance scale can't quite get it balanced. They're going to be out for a little chunk of time, and they might have more difficulty swimming down because of that. So in the bass fishing realm, that's why it's really important to explore other avenues of helping these fish adjust to the barotrauma they're experiencing. There was one really good paper that came out a couple years ago where the researchers replicated a live well environment on boats, and they experimented with control, so doing nothing for the fish caught at depth. They looked at fin clips, so attaching lead weights on alligator clips to the fins of fish to keep them upright in a live well. And then they also experimented with fizzing the fish. So that's the act of inserting a hypodermic needle through the flesh of the fish into its air bladder to relieve the excess pressure. In that way, when you hold the fish in the water, the extra air comes out just as air bubbles through the open bore of the hypodermic needle. And what they found was that by far fizzing was the most effective. It allowed fish to recover the quickest and resulted in the lowest post-release mortality.
That's a great point about the fizzing. I have a video that I'm going to show. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the footage. If you're listening on Spotify, you can hear the audio, and you can actually hear the moment that the needle punctures that flesh, and you hear that air released. Ooh, okay. So I come to the back of the boat, look at my screen, and there's a fish right on the bottom. So I'm going to drop straight down. You have that to some degree with a traditional sonar, and I just caught that fish. So it goes to show the electronics are your friends. That's a giant. Yes. You. That is what we wanted. That right there is what it's all about. I'm gonna get him in the live well. I am gonna have to fizz this fish. I can see that he's got some puffy eyes, and I want this fish to swim free. What a great fish. Big old girl. You can see she's got some character. Big old gut, big flippers on her, man. And you can see she just wants to roll over because she's all full of air. So we're gonna help her out. Get this fizzing needle, lift up a scale. And you can hear that. Now when she's in the water, try not to dip my remote, and you can see all the air bubbles coming out of that fizzing needle. So she's gonna fizz up. This is what you gotta do. Just give her a fizz. Bloop, 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 bloop. So now you can see she's not belly up, she's kind of on her side. I'm just gonna let her chill in the live well, give her some oxygen, and she will be just fine. All right guys, so as you can see, Tina's looking good. She's upright. We're gonna send her back home so that she can be caught again by someone else who is lucky enough to fish Lake Erie in the fall. We'll drink. I'll give a little bit more background on instances where you may see a fish experiencing barotrauma. Very commonly for me, I see it in yellow perch caught on Lake Erie. We're catching those fish usually deeper than 40 feet of water, and usually when you bring them up, you do see that air bladder protruding through the gullet of the fish, the puffy eyes, and for the most part, those fish, they just need to be kept. It's very hard to fizz a perch. I don't know if it's scientifically effective to do that. I just put them in the live well, and that seems to be the easiest way to deal with it. Similarly, with smallmouth bass, you see a lot of those same signs. You see the gullet, you see the puffy eyes, and that can happen. I've seen it as shallow as 25 feet of water in the Niagara River. Those fish have a different adjustment when they're down there, and when you bring them up and you keep them in a live well or you keep them out of the water too long, you really see those signs of barotrauma. So the biggest thing that Aaron was stressing, apart from anything, is if you are fishing, get the fish in the water as fast as possible. That's his big takeaway. Victor.
Another interesting thing is that with the barotrauma, it doesn't affect all fish the same way, of course, you can expect. And what that study I referred to also found was that the larger fish were the ones that had a much longer recovery time. So when you consider tournament angling, where you're always trying to keep specifically the largest fish, those ones are already more susceptible to not necessarily just experiencing barotrauma, but having lasting negative effects of barotrauma. It's why it's so important to be prepared to effectively take care of the fish while they're in your boat.
Yeah, so something that someone can do to take care of fish, like you just mentioned, would be to have a fizz kit. Now, this is just perfect timing because there happens to be someone who's on the show already who has his own fizz kits that are going to be available very soon.
Yeah, I was really excited to see Aaron's video come out. One thing I've been working on is trying to make fizz kits more accessible to anglers. I've been a part of a group in the past that would distribute fizz kits at tournament events, but there wasn't a way to really get them widespread out there. And I find with how many people are ordering on Amazon these days, of course, getting them in local tackle shops as well, but to be able to get them delivered overnight or 2-day shipping through Amazon, I found was going to be a really necessary thing with how prolific tournament events are now all over Canada. It used to be concentrated for the most part in Southern Ontario, but now you're having events pop up literally everywhere, and you have deep water bass catches all over the place. People are going to need these kits, and a good way to get them accessibly, I thought, would be online with free overnight shipping. So that's something I'm really looking forward to releasing, honestly, in the next couple days, calling the brand Baro Care. So your barotrauma, you're taking care of that with Baro Care fizzing kits. So sure, we'll have a link in the description below for the Amazon page that you can find those on.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to link those. Big supporter of Victor, and just this whole episode Really, I think the timing is great going into a new year, just discussing how our generation, this younger generation, I'm 27.
I'm 25.
He's 25. We are the future of fishing. I think a lot of my audience is probably in and around our age, maybe a little bit older, but we've been tasked with this incredible responsibility of now having these tools that can be exploitive in nature. You know, we are going to be able to catch more fish than any generation before us simply because we have this technology and we have this background. I started the Ontario Multi-Species Challenge last year because I believe that online tournaments are going to be the future of tournament fishing. I know there's people who agree. I know there's a lot of people who disagree. But mark my words, this will be the future, and it will be better for fish. It allows you to catch, photo, release the fish much faster, keeping it in the water, which is the main factor in successful releases. Piggybacking on that can be these ideas like the fizz kits and just better practice, better angling practice to get these fish back, respecting our resource. This is all tied up, and I'm so grateful that Aaron did this video because it starts the discussion. Now we're going to continue the discussion. When you have your club meeting or you have your fishing group that you have that competes, think, okay, how are we going to do this better for our generation and the generation ahead? Because we've been tasked with a lot here, I think, with Livescope. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's always a step in the right direction. You think of any new technology, honestly, in any realm, and it's inevitable that it's going to be part of the future. You have to accept it. I mean, Spider-Man said best, with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe that was Uncle Ben. Somewhere in that movie. But that's exactly the case. We're going to be stewards of the environment moving forward. Regardless of how often you fish or how you're involved in it, it's part of your responsibility. And if it's something you care about, it's something you want to preserve. You don't want fishing to be worse for you next year, and you definitely don't want fishing to be worse for your children. So taking the time to educate yourself, even on the relationship between science and fisheries management. You can do your part, take part in creel surveys at the dock, that kind of thing. I know a lot of studies are looking into whether anglers are using Livescope and what their catches are compared to anglers that aren't using Livescope and what their catches are. And you might be surprised to hear that oftentimes there isn't much of a difference. A new angler that doesn't know much about a water body with Livescope probably still won't catch as many fish as an angler that knows a lot about it. And again, that comes down to past knowledge and understanding versus just technology and a scientific approach. It might eliminate, or definitely eliminate, a lot of that learning curve. But there are so many variables out there. Science is always trying to keep up with them, which is what good science does. It doesn't always hit the mark, but it's always aiming to hit the mark. And it comes down to anglers and other stakeholders to keep science moving in the right direction and to always be cognizant of the direction that you're going in general and making sure it's where you want to find yourself.
Absolutely. One thing that Aaron really stresses is that he's not dismissing science as a whole as saying that it's ineffective. He is really just lobbying for that participation from anglers and saying, look, you guys spend way more time on the water than scientists do, even research scientists. You have an often more holistic view of how things work on the water. I just want to share a quick story. I was out with a tagging team this fall, and we were tagging pelagic fish, salmon, trout, all that good stuff. And the one guy that was on the trip, he was telling me about all the reading that he'd been doing about Lake Erie. He's a Lake Ontario guy, but he was curious about it. And he told me that the bass there won't go deeper than, it was, I think, 40 feet. Because that's what the literature said. I said, well, I got a few videos of me catching him out at 60 feet. And he was blown away. And it was just this really interesting conversation because, like, I respected this guy a lot, and I still do. Just his knowledge was limited by the textbook. And I think for scientists that don't have that maybe necessarily passion for the angling side of fishing, they may love fisheries, they may love fish, biology, all that stuff. But that firsthand experience of, I've been on the water, I've done this, I've seen this, I've talked to guys that I trust, I know this happened, that is the next level. And if we can start to bring all of that stuff together and start to talk about it, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect limits, it's going to affect seasons, and as anglers, that should be something that we really want to be a part of the discussion about. So that's pretty much it. We wanted to do this podcast today, getting into a new year, exciting times. Make sure you check out Baro Care, Victor Papaiz, bringing the power to the people to keep the fish healthy.
That's right.
And we're glad to have him on the show today. We're glad to be continuing the discussion. We're so glad that you tuned in today, and stay tuned for more content coming out this year. I've got some big plans. I'm going to be releasing some information pretty soon. So guys, thanks so much for tuning into the Love of Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Lyle Gator.
Thanks for having me, Lyle. I'm Victor.
Have a great day. Peace.